Hey, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Happy Easter for those of you that celebrate such things. No, I know you don't, but happy Easter all the same. We had a good Easter here. Did a little bit of Easter egg hunt stuff with the kiddos, and I try not to overload them with candy, of course. Too much sugar, they already get enough, but we had some fun doing that. We kept it pretty light today, did a little bit of park time, and earlier when it was still dry, and then got a couple donuts for them, and yeah, just had a quiet day mostly at home, but hope you all are doing well. Sorry I couldn't be here last night. I was trying my best, and I'm trying very hard to be able to be like available every single night. It's just I want it to be my new normal, but I just something about my body saying I'm on overload, and I sometimes I think that the only thing that's going to really keep me from doing it is like if I lose my voice, but it wasn't that last night. I was just literally like overloaded where I felt like the room was spinning. I was dizzy, and I think it's just from being overtired. It's also in part for when the kids are with me, and of course I'm a single dad. So when when the kids are with you, it's like you're the only parent. There's no backup. So kids wake up in the middle of the night. Daddy had a nightmare. Daddy needs some help. Daddy have a cough. Whatever it is, you get woken up over and over again, and it's just like, wow, I'm really tired. Feels like you haven't slept, even if you have. So my apologies for having to, to move last night's topic, which is tonight. Now tonight's topic to tonight, but it was important for me to be able to not push myself, and hopefully that was the right choice to not get myself sick or anything. But anyway, I just wanted to welcome you all to the channel, and also wanted to say, hey, Accidentally Agnostic, great to see you. Thank you so much. You too. Let's celebrate our resurrection from religion, right? Yeah, our resurrection for once, not Jesus's or the Easter bunnies or whatever. So wanted to mention a couple quick things, and then we'll get started. Number one, tonight is a call-in. So if anyone wants to join, I'm going to submit or include the StreamYard link in just a minute. But I'm going to give a quick word or two and then an intro. I did mention in a previous episodes that I am starting peer-to-peer support. Hey, Dark God 6, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am starting peer-to-peer support. It is, of course, non-clinical. There's a whole video I did about it for about 10 or 15 minutes, just talking about what it is and what it isn't. It's not the same thing as meeting with your therapist or counselor. I'm not certified. And, and no one that's looking for a diagnosis would want to in any way confuse the two. That's not what I'm offering, but I'm offering peer-to-peer support. So if anyone wants to consider that, feel free to reach out to me. I prefer Facebook so I can see your pictures and all that, know who I'm talking to in advance. My handle's Harmonic Tim. And also you can use just email if that's preferable. My email address is HarmonicAtheist@yahoo.com. But I'm hoping to start that up pretty much in full force. I've already received a barrage of emails from people very interested. I was honestly kind of surprised and shocked at how many people were more than interested in doing that. I mean, I was hoping, but I didn't expect it to be such an immediate barrage of people. So that's a great thing. I mean, I'm sad that people feel like they need so badly to have that, but obviously I'm glad that since they need that, and I can certainly understand their experience, that hopefully it can be a place of the meeting of the minds and a place where we can really find some encouragement one-on-one. So if anybody feels like that would help them, please feel free to reach out, and I'll give you the details. There's some forms I'm working on just to kind of make sure, again, anyone that signs up for it understands that it's not clinical in any way. We're not going to talk about anything relating to things you should only talk to with your therapist, such as suicidal tendencies or anything like that. That's not my purview. My goal is just to talk about deconversion. But anyway, if anyone is interested in that, I'll have more up soon about that, but I just wanted to make sure I mention that as we get started. And so tonight, I just wanted to sort of kick in with a couple thoughts. Again, this is going to be an open mic room, so I'll leave the link there. But I think it feels to me like this is a topic that it gets real close to the ache that we all have. there's so many different threads of deconversion, deconstruction, and our experience in it. But I hope that the tone of this is more of an ache, and also a bit of a haunting, in a sense of trying to speak the truth about what we went through, but also what do we wish Christians understood. So it feels to me like this topic is in that general category of what people, Christians, might assume about deconstruction and deconversion, especially if none of them have gone through it themselves, and especially if they have absolutely no respect for it. And I remember, was it Matt Walsh? No, Walsh. Matt Chandler, Pastor Matt Chandler, who talked a couple years ago about how deconstruction is the sexy thing to do. And of course, all the deconverted people said it's definitely not sexy. Like it's painful as hell. Like, where are you getting this? You have no idea what you're talking about. But for a lot of us, I think it's pretty clear that, number one, we weren't doing any kind of sexy thing. It was not a performance. It wasn't like a phase. Oh, you're just going through a midlife crisis or whatever. You just want to be rebellious. It wasn't anything like that. It was truly heartbreaking for us to leave Christianity. I'll always remember when I was in Bible college reading through C.S. Lewis's story, and how he talked about that when he was an atheist who became a Christian. He says, I was the most reluctant convert in all of England. I went kicking and screaming into the kingdom. And in a very parallel but opposite sense, I went kicking and screaming out of the kingdom. I didn't want to leave. It was just inevitable. This was clearly mythology and clearly just a man-made religion, despite all the attempts to describe it as truly a relationship and not a religion. This was a slow but eventually total collapse of that old worldview and everything that held that old life together for me. And I was looking at these beliefs that I had trusted with my heart and my soul, and that I thought was so rational. And there I was with better rationality, I would argue, and certainly with a sense of trembling and the fear of this is crazy. But I just, no matter what I did, I could not force myself to say this is true. And I think it's so hard when you realize that some of the deepest wounds for people like us that we're going to go through in that experience is that as you're unraveling, as your old life is coming to basically to nothing, and in a context when you might have been scared, even terrified, you're certainly grieving, you're trying to just speak honestly about what's going on, about what you studied and what you learned, what you thought through. So many Christians respond with such apathy and disrespect and suspicion and downright disgust. And they don't have any empathy. It's all about the party line. It's all about the formula. It's all about them warning you, you're on a slippery slope, or you're on your way to hell. There's no tenderness. And, there's so much accusation, no sense of curiosity. Tell me more about what you learned. I'd love to understand. What were your thoughts on this? And, we went through a crisis of faith, and we came out without that faith, and we survived. But in some ways, the scar switches from the scar of believing in God and having him as your father, and then you lost it and you go through your funeral for your heavenly father. That was the scar at first. But then the real scar is how Christians betrayed you. And so tonight is for people like us who wish that Christians understood that true inner cost of deconversion. The nights you spent wide awake when the insomnia took over, the nights you spent shaking, praying desperately to God, God, if you're there, if you're really there, answer me. Please help me. It feels like you're not there. It feels like this isn't real. But if you are, help me understand. All these prayers we would whisper right into the silence of the night. Perhaps a lot of frantic reading books, watching videos. Maybe if I get these quick answers, I'll go back to square one with God. At least some bare bones basics that I can rely on. And it just kept crumbling in our hands. Some of you might have felt like you were bargaining with God, certainly dreading what was coming, probably very lonely at times, if not in the human context, at least with the sense of, I thought I was talking to God and now I'm realizing maybe I wasn't. I thought I had a cosmic father and now it feels like maybe it's just me. And there's just this sick feeling of realizing that telling the truth about what's going on in your mind is going to cost you your church, your family, your marriage, your identity, your place in your own story in your mind, and so many other things. It's going to cost your memories, at least the way you interpret them. And people didn't leave Christianity because they wanted an easier life. They left because they could not pretend anymore. There's just no way. There's no way that Christianity is real. It's a false worldview. It's a fake worldview. It's a mythology-based worldview. And that pretending that we did for years eventually felt like we were just living a lie and living death. And so we sort of I want to begin tonight. And I've always got a lot to share, so I can share my story, but I'm open to and inviting anyone to come on and share their story instead. I can share my thoughts another day if we get enough people. But I think for a lot of us, we start out thinking of this as a theological journey or a philosophical journey, and we realize eventually this is a very human journey. And we have this ache. I wish people could finally understand what I went through, what I thought through, my conscience, my grief, my integrity. I was trying, clumsily, no doubt, but I was trying to stop lying about my worldview. And as I was becoming the very best version of myself, that's when you, Mr. Christian, attacked me the most. When I became the best version of myself, that's when you rejected me. When I rejected the lies and pursued the truth, that's when you attacked me. You showed your true colors, but I still thought I had a relationship with you and I wanted you to understand. And you can't force yourself to believe what you don't believe. I mean, that's just stating the obvious. If you just like, I just don't see it. I don't see it. This doesn't look real. You can't force yourself to believe it anymore. And yet they basically say or imply, yeah, but you must. You must find a way to believe it, despite the fact that you don't. No integrity from their side. They want you to believe despite the lack of evidence. They want you to see the evidence that isn't there, that they've construed and misconstrued in their minds. So my question for you and for myself is, if you could theoretically have a conversation with Christians and they could theoretically see past the nose on their face for just a moment, and they could theoretically actually care and give a damn for a moment about you, if they could theoretically say, I truly, really, actually, without lying, I want to understand, why did you leave? What happened? And for them to not judge you and say, oh yeah, no, I see now I've got 10 things to spout back at you as to why you're dead wrong. No, just to listen. You know, when I think of AA meetings, and I've never been to one, but I used to ride the train when I used to work in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania for a couple of years at a mutual fund company called Vanguard. And I'd ride from Upper Darby, which was like 69th Street, you know, the little trolley. And I would ride this train, this little, like a tram, and then I'd ride a bigger train to Valley Forge. The one in the middle, the little trolley is not the one, but there's like this tram, it's like a high-speed glorified trolley. I'd ride it for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes every morning, every afternoon. And there was this guy, I'll still always remember, his name was Frank. Still see his face, but we became friends. We rode at the same times. And especially in the afternoon, he got real chatty. And I found out he was absolutely neck deep into his need for AA to literally survive every single day as an alcoholic. He was like, I can't skip a day. I'll be in big trouble if I skip a day. And so he'd tell me every day, we'd talk about his AA meetings. And I rode that train and saw him probably for a year or two. But he'd tell me about what it was like. And I'd learned enough to know that it sounded like, and I probably saw some stuff from TV too that filled in some gaps, but it sounded like there was no judgment. You could come in and say there was 10 people that came that night and you're in a circle of chairs. The way he presented to me was nobody judges anybody. Nobody says, damn, you messed up. Like you fell off that wagon or whatever the expression is, but you deserved it. You fucked up. Like, no, this isn't a place of judgment. This is a place for everyone to sit quiet, let someone pour their heart out, And when they're done, all you say is, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I might be wrong. That's the impression I got of AA meetings. And if that's at all possible, that you could have that relationship and that conversation with Christians and just they would just sit there and say, I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to listen and understand. And I don't think most Christians can remotely even get close to that. That's one of the most beautiful parts about the secular community is we care about people's stories. I grew up thinking about in church all the time about people's testimonies. People would get up and share a testimony about something small. Oh, God, whatever, he healed me this week. And so-and-so, I've been praying for my cousin Jimmy, and he finally gave his life to the Lord. And of course, I would listen on the family radio in my parents' home when I was growing up to Pacific Garden Mission, where they would have people's testimonies of people who've been truly down and out. They were drug addicts and homeless people, and they, just everything in life had fallen apart. And they'd come to Christ through Pacific Garden Mission, and the preacher would get them back with the Lord. And it was just this beautiful story, and they would dramatize it. Usually with actors, voice actors who would do it, but sometimes literally the person that went through it would be invited, if they were able to do it professionally, to literally tell their story. So they would dramatize it. I actually knew somebody at my church that had gone through that. Pretty cool to meet him. But testimonies meant everything. And what's crazy is that on this side, when you have a testimony of deconversion, they don't care. But I love how we honor each other and say, our stories are all different. We're landing so differently. And that's okay. But we respect the fact that your story matters. And the fact that, number one, I might relate to you. Number two, somebody in the community is probably going to relate to you. And I'm glad of that. Someone's going to find your story inspiring, even if I can't connect on the same level. And I know that even if none of us can, I know that I can empathize and put myself in your shoes. And if I went through what you did, if I heard what your parents said to you about God and about sin and hell, if I heard what your pastor said, and if I understood what you said in your story about what your authority figures said and did to you over the years and what you went through, I can see how I would have responded the same way. The testimony of deconversion is powerful, and we respect people's testimonies far more as secular people than we ever did as Christians, in my opinion. So my opportunity for you is, if you have anything on your heart that you'd say, man, I do. I've got one or two or three or whatever. I've got some things in my heart that I wish they would listen to. I wish they would have understood. And I know they're probably never going to. But what would you wish? What would you wish for? Real quick, a couple comments here. Hey, Noel's here. Great to see you. Hello, Tim and friends. Great to see you. Very, very nice to have you here. And looks like you changed your handle, but good to see you here. And Crawler Junkie, hello, good to see you. So I'm going to kick us off. I think one of the most important things for me to say, and I'm not sure quite how to say it, but just to say, I wish they understood that we did not leave lightly or flippantly. There's probably a more poetic way to say it, but just in the sense of, this wasn't like a quick decision. This was years of inner conflict. This was years of thinking through the issues. Most people that I've talked to didn't suddenly flip on a dime. They thought about it. It was not a burst of carelessness or a burst of I'm getting tired of my church. I'm bored. I mean, we slowly thought through the issues. We slowly counted the costs, as Jesus says. We counted the costs. We knew it would mean risking everything in many cases. Life before felt so coherent and simple and safe and meaningful, and all of a sudden that gets washed away. And some of you spent months and even years trying to silence your questions, trying to say, I have to find a way back. I have to find a way back home to God, because you knew what it would cost. You knew these questions, where they were leading. You probably felt like I've explained or used the illustration of like that jungle drum beat. It's in the far distance at first, and you hear it getting louder and louder and louder, and it's scary. What is that? Who's coming through the forest? Who's coming through the jungle? They're coming right toward me. And you feel that. That's deconversion. It feels like an attack on your spirit in your mind at first. Like, what in the world is this? And you slowly realize that that jungle beat is you. You are coming for yourself. It's a beautiful thing. But at the time, it's scary. And I wish they understood that we did not leave lightly. Many of us arguably fought very hard to stay. That's something else. It's probably separate. But I wish they understood that. We fought to stay. We would ask God, God, please, please show up. Please show up. Not in some weird testing sense like Gideon's fleece, but just, God, please show up. I need to know that you're there. I know in a sense that you're there. I know through and through that you're real and the Bible's divine. I know the gospel's true, but I need to feel it in a more real sense than I've ever felt, because things are like pulling, like I'm unraveling in some way. And because we did not drift out casually, because we begged with God and we studied and we repented and we cried, and many of you probably fasted and you read apologetics books and you went to your pastor and you sought counsel and you tried to recover your certainty with Jesus. And I think sometimes Christians must think we were eager to leave because we had already a premeditated intention to sin or to rebel in some way. And in reality, like I said earlier, many of us were desperate to stay. We were desperate to remain in Christianity, because for so long it wasn't even an issue of it being in Christianity like as in a religion. We were desperate to stay because it felt so real. It felt so incredibly real. I'm going to read a comment here that came in. Hey, Shell, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate you being here. And accidentally agnostic. One point I try to make is that if I can do certain things with the gospel and end up agnostic or atheist, isn't there something wrong? I was only seeking to understand and obey. Yeah, that's a really good one. I appreciate the way you worded that. So if you're trying so hard to just understand and obey and get a fuller background, perhaps understand history better, understand church history better, read different interpretations and translations, and the more you read, the more you interpret, the more you learn, it actually puts alarm bells up. Like, this isn't, you go on trying to do apologetics, and the search for better apologetics leads you to say, I'm finding this very disturbing, it's falling apart. A lot of people have described it in that way, and it's very true. Why, if I'm trying so hard to understand the gospel, why didn't God show up and push it further down the apologetics line? Why did I ask these questions thinking God was going to make it my faith stronger than ever, and in reality it just got weaker and weaker and weaker? You can say all you want, well, maybe you weren't a Christian in the first place, but you saw my life. You saw me give my life to Christ. You saw me give my life away for decades. You saw my passion. You'd say, what was the deepest desire of your heart, Tim? Was it to make a name for yourself? Was it to get money? Was it to be, just have a soft, cushy life? No. My desire for years and years and years was to go to the hardest places, the dirtiest places, the sickest places, and bring the gospel. I wanted to run a mission a yard from the gates of hell, as they say. I meant it, and I did it. I lived it. I went to some filthy places for years upon years upon years upon years. Filthiest places in and around Philadelphia. And it wasn't filthy to me. It was beautiful, because there was people there that were about to, in my opinion, about to enter a crossover from being in sin to being in Christ. It meant the world to me. If you said, what's the most important thing in your heart? It was always this one sole thing. I want to take people to heaven. I want people to know they can be forgiven for their sins. I was not pretend. This was completely real. Panda says, I was trying to find a reason to believe that was different than Mormons had. Spoiler, there weren't any. Yeah. I was trying to find a reason to believe that was different than Mormons had. Yeah, that's a great part of our experience, is that we realize, not just comparative mythology, but comparative religion, we're all doing the same variations on the same theme, and our apologetics are ultimately the same too. I would say Christianities are at points more coherent, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're still ending up with a talking snake, a talking donkey. You're still ending up with, Joshua and the sun standing still. You're still ending up with uh, just crazy nonsense, starting with the Garden of Eden, going forward. You're still ending up with the one true God who likes to cut off the end of little boys' penises. You're still dealing with blood magic. Like, how far can your apologetics get? It looks fucking stupid from start to finish. Philip says, a few days ago you said that Christianity had stolen your life. But if you could go back, how would you have lived your life differently? There's a can of worms for you, Tim. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a can of worms for all of us. If we could go back, how would we live our lives differently? I'm assuming, and I might be wrong, but I'm assuming you mean like if I could go back and relive it as a secular person, I think that would have made a world of difference to me, because I would have made endless choices differently. I mean, everything would have been different. It's not like how in one particular way. It's like the whole thing. The whole thing. You live in a way that says, I am trying to put as many true things in my mind as possible, as take away as many false things as possible. The way you look at everything in life, your purpose, the way you look at politics. I mean, if my goal, I mean, and it is to leave this planet better than I found it, then the whole direction of what that means and how I live it is different. I don't live for God. I don't live for the kingdom. I don't live for Jesus and blood magic. I don't live for the cross. I live to say we are evolved primates who are in our infancy, and we are just scratching the surface of the beauty of what our consciousness can lead us to in terms of humanism, pursuing good for as many people as possible and trying to take away as much harm and pain as possible. Living for that, I'm sure I would have made thousands of different choices. So I would say it's a can of worms for all of us, but only in the sense that it's profoundly, radically different. I mean, when you take away mythology as your primary lens and motivation, you get to be yourself and you get to pursue good things, real things, instead of the mythology garbage. So your shell says, I was not eager to leave. I wanted it to be true. Yeah. I loved God and people in my church. They turned to mega culture and I deconstructed and realized it was baloney. Yeah, for sure. And the MAGA stuff, wow, that's sad to hear. Not surprising, unfortunately, but it is sad to hear. Christian conservative pop culture rules the church, even the ones who claim inerrancy and fundamentalism. But the Bible is just as bad. Good and bad, but the bad can be weaponized for politics. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're seeing that playing out like every day, every hour now. Once you realize, Panda says, once you realize that the indoctrination was unavoidable for some of us, it gets so much easier to be okay with your past choices, especially if you had a traumatic childhood. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, very true. Yeah, indoctrination, when it happens at such a young age, you don't have a chance. You just don't. There were certainly some people that I came across who had a chance, in the sense that they were just naturally more rebellious. They didn't want anyone telling them what to do. So the fact that Christianity is naturally restrictive with its rules, they would naturally rebel. And so they kind of stayed within Christianity, but on the fringes of the whole, I'm giving my life, my everything to it. They were in, but like just barely. But anyone that was in a little bit further, where I was like, no, I mean this. Like, I don't want to rebel against God. I really want to give my heart and soul and life and time and everything to Jesus Christ in every which way. And once you were in there, if you're in there from age 4 and 5, and it just got deeper and deeper and deeper from that point, which it did for a lot of us, yeah, you had no choice. You had no chance. You were stuck, royally stuck. Yeah. Dark God 6 says, every day we're living in a lie. Yeah, it's very true. Just pop in the link in case anyone's joining us late and wants to join. You're welcome to. Shell says, people think the Bible has a moral superiority, but the overarching message in every story isn't be good. It's obey God, even when it isn't ethical or moral. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's very true. And that's a good point. Going back to the title of our chat tonight is what we wish Christians understood. I think we would definitely say we wish they understood what we were claiming about our deconversion, like what our concerns were, but also more fundamentally, I wish they understood their own book. It's amazing to me how many people, it's amazing to me how many people will look at the Bible and they'll go to church on Sundays and sing, "Our God is a good, good Father," while literally reading about him drowning people in the flood, or killing a whole bunch of babies in Egypt, or sending snakes to bite his own people and kill them in the desert, all kinds of stuff, and making them wander in the desert for 40 years, and then slaughtering them because they complain because they're not getting enough food. It's like, this is a God who's really, really sick, and yet he's a good, good Father. It is shocking that Christians cannot see, and I say that to myself too. Why couldn't I see it? And again, it's indoctrination. Indoctrination does this job very well. Cathedra, I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. Cathedra 7616. Christian was a label given to the followers of Truth, Life, and the Way by Nero. That is like the current Black community taking on the N-word. How much has it helped them? Go on, I will wait. I'm not going to open that box any further. Stephen Boland says, "I'm here, Tim. Great to see you, Stephen." And Panda says, "Or having a king cut a baby in half to figure out who its mom was." Yeah, that was crazy. Crazy, crazy. That story was like, what a wise man. Like, it's nuts what we thought was so good. And yet you get really addicted to almost like God's going to, trick everybody. He's going to be so, he's going to get you in the end, and you're going to realize he's so powerful. And we justified just so much nastiness in his name. So much nastiness. Especially, like, I think I could argue that a lot of us didn't read all those bad passages, but some of us, like myself, I read the Bible through like word for word several times. I think I estimated once how many times it was. It was at least a dozen times, if it's probably more than that. But just being conservative, it was at least a dozen times straight through. So I had no excuse. I know I read the passages about how to take sex slaves, how to kill people, how to kill children, how to steal their land, all this stuff, and I never saw it as a red flag. I was like, this is God's word. He says it must be good. So I had no excuse. I did not see the passages. I saw them many times, apparently, and it didn't even stick with me that that's a big deal. Shell says, his ways are higher than our ways. Doesn't fix the serious moral and ethical issues either. That's like saying a judge's corrupt actions are better because he studied the law. Yeah, that's true. Very true. Dr. Epidom says, Tim, thanks to your channel, I deconstructed around this Easter time last year, and I remember being so triggered and angry about the holiday. Yeah. Well, I'm so appreciative of that this channel has been a part of your deconstruction journey. That's awesome. I'm so glad to be part of that. And I do hope that it's been going well as you've gotten more grounded, hopefully. And as I like to say, spent the time reclaiming your identity and maybe doing some healing. But yeah, this time of year can be triggering. I mean, I get to a point where I don't care in some ways about it all. I think at some point it just seems like it's a shame that our society can't see past it. It just seems so ridiculous. The idea that they can't see past the names of Christianity. But I know a lot of it is again, the indoctrination and the propaganda, as well as the fact that a lot of it's political at this point. So, but it does hurt. There are things that certainly hurt. I think what hurts the most is just the people that, to me at least, are the people that would write you off because you don't believe like them. And they just, again, to the title of this talk tonight, they don't care. They don't care about why you left. They're just going to write you off. And yet it's so obvious to us. And that's one of the hardest things to me is dealing with the reality of like, why couldn't I see, and why can't, like, what specifically is it that keeps someone from seeing? And you get people that say, like myself, I looked at this stuff for a long time and I couldn't see it. For example, I had a friend of mine, her name was Susan. She eventually did an interview on the channel. She and I had been in touch by email 10 years earlier when she left Christianity. I asked her about it. I never did anything with her response for 10 years. 10 years. I just let it go. You can't see it till you see it. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's just the way it works. It's so frustrating. Because then now that you're on the outside and you're looking in, you're like, I wish you all could see what you're doing to yourselves, but they can't see it. And I think, I've talked with Jonathan M.S. Pierce over in the UK a number of times. He's been on probably maybe 3 or 4 times, and I need to catch up with him again. But he talks repeatedly about the fact that for a lot of people, it's the terror of this, the terror of what you're claiming about your worldview as an atheist. If you're even remotely correct, then number one, I have no idea what my purpose is in life. Number two, I'm guessing based on what you're saying that in your worldview, I wouldn't go anywhere when I die. So death is much scarier. It's the end. That's it. Game over. And then the terror of what about my loved ones, especially if you've got someone that was really close to you. And I know that's a horrible topic to think through, but what if you did lose a spouse or a parent young or a child, whatever, just something that's just like, this is terror beyond terror. Like, this is horrible what you lost. And I understand that's a really good reason to hope that there's an afterlife. And if I lost a child, and I hope I never do, but if that ever was my experience, I can see why people would say, I have to have an afterlife. I have to be reunited with my loved ones. I just have to. But the terror of saying, even if I theoretically just play devil's advocate with you, what would your worldview be like? What would that outcome be like? What does it mean? Well, it means that the outcome is terrifying. I don't go anywhere when I die. I don't see my loved ones. My life has no purpose in the sense of what I thought it did. In the words of the Apostle Paul, if Christ is not raised, then we are of all people to be most pitied. And that is the truth. That is very true. But Dr. Epidem, I do wish you well. Thank you so much for checking in. I'm so glad you're here, and your journey, I'm sure if it's only been a year, I'm sure it's had some ups and downs, and we wish you well. Wish you a lot of healing. It makes me think of how much that Satan may be the actual good guy. Yeah. Good point. Why did you become a Christian to begin with, and was there an epiphany, and how can it be claimed that learning about Christianity helps people whilst also denying not learning about it is detrimental? I became a Christian based on what I would consider childhood indoctrination. I gave my life to Christ when I was about 5 years old. And there was just messages everywhere of, you have a sin problem and Jesus is a wonderful savior. If you believe, you'll go to heaven. If you die without Christ, you'll burn in hell. But this is also not just a transaction and a religion in a sense. They would always say this is a relationship. God pursued you, like the prodigal son story. He pursued you as well as he waited there for you, waited for you to come home. And God is saying, I love you so much. It was a love story. So the epiphany for me was just as much as a 5-year-old can have an epiphany, saying, I want this. I mean, what 5-year-old doesn't want to go to heaven and avoid hell? And how can it be claimed that learning about Christianity helps people whilst also denying not learning about it is detrimental? I'm not sure I understand your question. Learning about Christianity helps people in various ways, but it depends on how open your mind is. You could learn about Christianity and become a more profoundly committed Christian. You could learn more about Christianity and say this is bullshit. It just depends on what you're doing with the information you get. It really is. I'm not sure if I understand your question, Philip, but it really depends on where you take your information. Shell says 1 or 2 contradictions between the Gospels may be rectified with mental gymnastics, but one after the other makes it less and less likely. All unlikely solutions can simultaneously be true. Yeah. Very, very well said. yeah, there's just so many things. And I think to me, it got much bigger when I realized a couple things that I was looking at it incorrectly. It wasn't about trying to find ways to harmonize the gospels, but it's realizing when you realize that we have at least 50 to 60 gospels that we know of, most of them anonymous. And I mean, we have titles for them, but like we don't actually really know who wrote them, just like we don't know who wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But then realizing that there's a lot of evidence that there probably were originally hundreds of these different ones. And then realizing that they were truly copying from the Greco-Roman mystery cults as well as from Homer's Odyssey. You realize that this is just what they do. This was stories. And then one thing that really shocked me a lot was to see on Derek's channel, Myth Vision, there was someone who had talked, at least one person who had talked about the fact that this may have originally been a stage play. The Gospels, one of the Gospels, and then the others that came may have been stage plays. Someone literally not writing just a story, literally writing a play to act out. And some very interesting reasons that they think that was exactly what some of these Gospels originally were, and that they just evolved and took on a life of their own. But how crazy is that? That we may be looking at simply a stage play. This is early Shakespeare, Greco-Roman Shakespeare. How crazy is that? Yes, Tim, I sit here deconverted explaining things to Christians and they're clueless because they don't know their book. I deconverted because I knew the book so well. I can't do the work for them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in some ways, what can you do? It's like you guys should know your Bible better than we do. But I was on the other side that I knew my Bible really, really well. The issue was more just like having eyes to see. I could quote thousands of verses literally verbatim with reference. And it was not an issue of knowing the book so well. It was an issue of interpreting it and also seeing the atrocities for what they were. And then eventually, to me, it was the comparative mythology that made the only real difference. Everything else should have made a difference, but nothing else did. I needed to see the Gospels. I needed to see the Gospels were already existing. They're already extant in the Greco-Roman mystery cults. They're already extant in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're already extant in Homer's Odyssey. It's all already there. They're already there in Mithraism. They're already there in Zoroastrianism. It's all already there. This was just, it took some kind of heavy Jewish influence where they're trying to create this new supernatural demigod character, weaving in all these Old Testament stories that meant so much to them, weaving it with the Greco-Roman mystery cults. Once you see it, it's like, oh my God, what have I done? This is just mythology. But yeah. Shell says, yep, agree. The best way to make an atheist is to read the Bible, especially the Gospels, side by side, without constant pressure and outside influence by the church. Yeah. Now, I would also say, for me, one of the biggest things that became the sort of blew the lid off this thing kind of dynamic was somehow in my mind, and this doesn't make sense, so just bear with me, but somehow in my mind, I thought, even if you deconstruct Jesus, God, as in like Yahweh, is like solid as a rock. I know it doesn't make sense. Christianity is a coherent, it's all coherent or it's not. If you lose Jesus, you kind of lose Christianity. But somehow in my mind, I thought we can work through the stuff in the Gospels somehow, but Yahweh is untouchable. And once I got into understanding the ancient Canaanite mythology and the pantheon and the demigods, Asherah, it's like, no, Yahweh is more suspect at that point. Once you lose Jesus and Yahweh, there's no going back. There's just no going back. Philip says, one major contradiction in Matthew, Mark, Jesus' first appearance to his disciples occurs in Galilee, but in Luke it is clear they were in Jerusalem. Those two accounts cannot be reconciled. I'm sure the apologists have answers for it, but yeah. But again, when you realize that there may have been political reasons or spiritual reasons that they would say these things, like in other words, a lot of the words don't mean what they mean. You know what I'm saying? They have hidden meanings. I hope you all understand. Probably Gnostic Christianity was the first Christianity. Gnostics were probably first. They were eventually literalizing it, but Gnostics were probably the first people. And so, when he says things like, Jesus says, "Go, I want you guys to go prepare the Last Supper, and I want you to find the man with the water pitcher, and he'll help you get to the upper room." You know, alarm bells all over the place. That should be clear. We know who the man is with the water pitcher. We know what the upper room is. But you get to, again, you understand the ancient writings, and you see things like the road to Emmaus, where Jesus reveals himself to his disciples post-resurrection, and they were like, they didn't understand first. Then Jesus reveals himself and he disappears. Like, oh my goodness, our hearts were burning as this guy explained this stuff to us. And now we see we were just talking with God, with Jesus himself, the resurrected Jesus. And it's on the road to Emmaus. Well, everyone knew who Emmaus was. He's one of the characters in Homer's Odyssey. He's one of the people that recognized Odysseus by the scars. The road to Emmaus. When you look at Jesus healing the blind man, what is his name? Well, everyone knew that Plato's big book, Plato's Bible, was the Timaeus. So what do they call this blind guy that Jesus heals? He's called Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. They're copying off of Plato. They're copying off of Homer. Everything means something else. The word Golgotha. I mean, just it keeps going on. There's hidden meanings in everything in the Gospels, all over the place, and so many references to Old Testament stuff. It was heavily symbolic and heavily Gnostic, and that's where I don't even see contradictions the same way as like you can't reconcile them. These are people trying to fit symbols. They're trying to weave symbols and early Kabbalah, early numerology into this stuff, early astrotheology, or at that point probably late astrotheology, into their stories. To them, they probably had zero interest in reconciling the Gospels because they had different symbols they were trying to put, different ideas that they wanted. We want you to see the secret sauce that we wove in. And those of you who are initiates will be like, oh, I see what you did there. Nice. Good job. That's nice double entendre there. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. And the initiates knew. They're not trying to reconcile it. They're trying to get you to see their symbols. Shell says, other things I wish they knew about. Ugarit, Sumer, Persia, Greece, and Rome all influenced Christianity. It evolved from animistic divine council to cosmic dualism with the Greek concept of Hades. Olympia. Yep. See here. I'm not sure if I missed the second part of Shell's comment there, but I think you were saying Hades and Olympia, or Olympus. I'm sorry, Olympus. Cathra 7616. If God is light and truth, and Satan is darkness and lies, how is a liar the good guy? Does anyone like being lied to? I'm not sure if I'm understanding exactly what you're asking. No one said Satan is darkness and lies. That's just part of it's all a big story. Satan in their story was originally one of the fallen angels, so he was originally light and truth, and he was cast out of heaven with the Watchers because they wanted to copulate with human women. The idea of him being darkness and lies was part of the evolved story that changed over time. There is no God or Satan. There's nothing about it where we're trying to associate them with that, but obviously Christianity does. But does anyone like being lied to? Of course not. That's why we left Christianity. A liar is not the good guy. But what we're saying is it looks like God is the liar in most of the stories. God is the one who lies. So if we're going to attack somebody, we're definitely going to attack the Yahweh character. He's pretty psychopathic and he definitely lies a lot. A stage play. That's embarrassing. Yeah, I mean, we may have literally been our Lord and Savior and the love of our lives, the lover of our souls may have been a stage play character. We were worshiping Othello. We were worshiping Hamlet. We were stuck in a stage play. The first fragment of a biblical manuscript we have is P52, the Gospel of John. It was written 125 years after Jesus, and it is the size of a playing card. Yeah. Forgot to mention Babylon. The Babylonian exile massively changed Judaism. Daniel was written much later, around the time of the Maccabees, as a story of Jewish triumph through occupation. Yeah, Satan told the truth. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and there's the idea of who's good and who's bad. I mean, it changes based on what you think happened in the stories. I mean, was Satan the original serpent, or was that Lilith? It just depends on which version of the mythology you're going to go with. You know, and you know, was Satan the same thing as Lucifer, or was that something different? It just depends on how you interpret the mythology, and what timeline. Like, that mythology meant one thing in one period, and the mythology meant something else in a different period. Which period are we going to look at? You know, and are you going to bring Enoch and the Watchers into this or not? And how do you interpret that? Were the Watchers wrong? If the Watchers had been real, would they be wrong to have wanted to copulate with human women? Is that wrong? By whose standard? Well, if it was God's standard, then why did he ever make angels with genitals? Why not just make angels with no genitals? It doesn't make sense. So who's really wrong? It's like God teased Adam and Eve in the garden with the fruit, and he teased these angels with genitals. Just make these angels without any gender. Just, it makes no sense. The whole thing is just mythology upon mythology upon mythology. The testimonium is cited as historical evidence for Jesus. Excuse me. But historians now think it was almost certainly an interpretation by Eusebius. Yeah, a lot of people do. I've seen some people who don't. I have had a Josephus scholar on several times who said he doesn't know, but he thinks it's possible that it was written by him and it's just been misinterpreted as to what he meant. But I've heard, I mean, if anyone's looking to look into the testimonium with greater detail, I would say one of the best places to go is Myth Vision. I can't imagine Derek doesn't have at least a dozen different videos on different scholars who've talked about this. So I would recommend. I mean, certainly I would recommend the one I did, but years ago. But you know, Derek's probably had so many different scholars, and so that's a great place to go to sort of see, you know, what scholars do say. But yeah, it's a good point. A lot of people think it might, and it doesn't. You know, there's all kinds of other issues with Josephus that come up, which is it's fun to think about. You know, what could have been behind some of his motivations for what he said and did. Again, anyone that wants to join, feel free. We're at the top of the hour almost, and we'll probably go for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on who jumps in or does not. I was talking before about how, from my perspective, some of the things I wish Christians knew is that we didn't leave lightly, and that I wish they knew that we fought to stay. But I wish they understood as well. My third point is, I wish they understood that it was intellectual and emotional, both of them. It was not just an emotional reaction. And it also was not just about the evidence. You know, it was like, this was our heads and our hearts together. They were entangled in this. We studied doctrine and theology and history, church history, biblical scholarship, the contradictions we were just talking about, morality, science, dynamics of trauma and dynamics of, you know, indoctrination, propaganda, and mind control. We understood the dynamics of groupthink. We understood other psychological aspects of this. We were studying and trying to figure out more of the facts of it and the dynamics of how this could work if it was just human. But we were trying to do that in the context where we had this huge emotional weight because it was real to us. And so while you and I read about how did the canon get formed and how did they put books in and then take some back out and put others out that were out, put them back in later. How did we study evolution and our, you know, the beauty of how life evolved on this planet? We were learning those things, and we were getting facts. And we were getting well rounded and grounded in our understanding of all the information. But at the same exact time, we were grieving the loss of our Heavenly Father and of heaven itself, and of prayer and of our church community, and of meaning itself. It was all there. And so I think a lot of Christians would probably misunderstand and take for granted the idea that we were either cold and callous in this, that we didn't really give a damn, that by the time we deconstructed, we already had one foot out the door because we wanted to sin. We were just waiting for an excuse. Or maybe some of us, you know, had got a grievance against a pastor or a parent or something, at some reason, some memory that kind of just made you feel like you had to find some way, some out. But they come up with all these excuses as to why you left and to why they can undo it and debunk it and say it really doesn't count. It really doesn't count. This is not a legitimate escape, whatever you want to call it. This is not a legitimate deconstruction. That this is truly an example of someone that just made some stuff up and said, I got to go. But you didn't have any good reason. No, we had good intellectual, academic reasons, and we were emotionally vested, all the way vested. This was real. Again, we did not leave because we wanted to sin. Now, I know that some people would probably say, no, I admit it. I really wanted to go sin. Granted, I hear that occasionally, but I think most of us would say the opposite, that no, that we were headstrong, committed to purity and holiness and to living for the Lord, to living for the beauty of the gospel, to bring people to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. And so sin wasn't in the equation. It wasn't an equation of selfishness or pride. We wanted to love the Lord and serve him and honor him. And so when Christians give us that explanation, you just wanted to sin, it's like they just we had this complex, painful process, and they just want to flatten it out into this really cheap moral caricature. And it's so degrading, and it's so wrong. We were trying to live with greater honesty, greater commitment to truth, more compassion, more integrity than ever before. And so, for example, you could have left Christianity at a point where you're saying at the same time, even things that you would have been committed to specifically because of Christianity, such as, I want to be more faithful than ever to my marriage partner. I want to be more loving than ever towards other people. I want to give and have a servant's heart. I'm committed to the truth and to the faith, and I'm deeply afraid of being wrong. And I just want to live a life that makes this is beautiful and that makes an impact for time and eternity. And you're fully committed to these things because of God, because of your relationship with Christ. And in that context, we went kicking and screaming out of the kingdom, begging God, I don't want to lose my faith. And it happened anyway. It happened despite our best efforts. Let's see here. Where did I leave off? Accounts were added to later Gospels to fill plot holes. Guards at the tomb to stop his body being stolen is one example. Doubting Thomas to refute Thomas, the twin, taking Jesus' place on the cross or after. These things didn't appear in the first gospel written. Their inclusion in later Gospels is like evidence for the first crappy apologetics. Yeah, exactly. I think this is a troll. I'm just going to delete this last one second. And there's just so many ways in which it doesn't look at all like what we were told. Now, again, I don't think the original Christians saw it that way. I don't think they saw it from the apologetics perspective. I think the original Christians saw it as symbols. I think they were looking at it from a very esoteric, Gnostic perspective. So to them, to have different stories was almost required, because they were trying to say, the first version you heard of this does not really indicate and exemplify all the different spiritual lessons you need to truly be an initiate that goes to the deeper levels in your understanding of Christ, the Christ spirit, or whatever, the Christ oneness, however they would have phrased it. And so to them, to have a different book that kind of took you into a different story, that took you through better symbols and so forth. I mean, these guys were masters at storytelling. They were masters at storytelling in ways that we still don't get. There's stuff in the Gospels that we still don't get. And I have a sneaking suspicion, this is just I have no evidence for this, this is just my personal conviction, but I have a sneaking suspicion that some of them went deep enough to weave music into the Gospels, and we've never found it. Some of these guys were clearly into harmonics, clearly into sacred architecture. And the highest point of so many of that stuff was wrapped up in music. So for them to write gospels and not weave some secret music or notes or something into this doesn't make sense to me. Music was the high point of so many of the parts of that, of those secret cults. And Pythagoreanism is clearly woven into the gospels. Pythagoras and music go hand in hand. And to have gospels written by Pythagoreans and have no music doesn't make sense. I think there's probably music in there somewhere. Maybe it was a different one that we've lost to time, but they were doing a very different stuff than we think. Very different stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, anyone that wants to join, you're welcome to. I've got plenty to share, but if anybody wants to jump in, you're welcome to. I wish that Christians understood that our conscience played a bigger role than they probably think. They probably think we were ignoring our conscience and searing our conscience. People think that we deconverted because we could no longer pursue God and all the beauty of his morality with the immorality that we were pursuing and entertaining in our hearts. And so we seared our conscience. And as we seared our conscience and we got more worldly and sinful, God's holiness became more offensive and intense and too much for us to take. And so they would say, as you deconverted people, as you deconstructed people, keep talking about how you suddenly can't stand hell, the topic of hell, or eternal punishment, or God's divine violence, or the substitutionary atonement, or misogyny, or just anything, silencing of abuse victims. You say it became unbearable to you, but in reality, they think what was happening was your conscience was somehow being seared. And if you understood those things from God's perspective, just like the Bible says, they're spiritually discerned. They cannot be understood by a natural man. Spiritual discernment comes in here. Because you've seared your conscience, you can no longer see things God's way. And that's why you come up with this human version of the way you should see sexuality or violence or abuse or whether it's right for God to send people to hell. If you saw the truth and if you saw sin from the perspective of God's white hot holiness, your conscience would be pricked. Your conscience would be in alignment with God, and you would not be against God's word. That's what I think a lot of people think, and it's hard for them to, I think, admit and to see that our consciences did play a major role in this. We said, I can't see you attacking my LGBTQ friends and be okay with it. I can't see you do that and put them down and not speak up at some point. I have to speak up. My conscience was not seared. My conscience was in many ways becoming more sensitive and more useful, doing its job really, really well. But they can't see it. They think, now you've seared your conscience. If you don't think hell's real, you're soft on sin. That's a seared conscience. You're soft on sin. Looks like Shell joined here, so I'm going to put my notes to the back, and we're going to bring Shell into chat. And let me actually do one quick comment here from Keith, and then we'll jump in with Shell. Keith does Kung Fu. For me, not having the weight of shame and fear over sin, realizing it's a false and manipulative system, made sin lose all of its power in my mind. Now I can actually improve inside out for myself. Yeah, it's a great way to put it. Yeah, again, realizing it's a false and manipulative system. And that's honest, that's a crux of it for so many of us. Once you see not just the claims of Christianity and debunking them, but once you see how did they get this past you? How did they trick you? Once you see not the truth claims, whether they're true or not, but just the mechanism, the machinery of how this works, how you get people in, how you get them to turn a blind eye to so much. Yeah, it's you can't unsee it. Thank you, Keith. Great comments. I'm going to go to Shell now. Shell, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Tim?
Good. Thank you so much for your comments and for joining us too here. And I'll let you I've been talking enough, so I'll let you take the floor.
I have kind of been just sending texts as we were driving home from family dinner tonight, so I didn't have time to jump on earlier.
Nice. Where'd you go for dinner?
Over to my dad's house.
Okay.
We,
Okay.
we do a little Easter dinner and all that stuff. Thankfully,
Nice.
that side of my family is not like super religious or anything like that. So it's not big part of it or anything like that. So that's nice.
Yeah, not too intense. That's really
Yeah.
good. Very cool. Very cool. Well, what other thoughts do you have besides the stuff you were typing about what you wish Christians understood about your deconversion?
So, I mean, like you were saying earlier, I wish people understood that it wasn't like because I wanted to think a certain way or do something my own way or something like that. I got accused of just like being like I guess egotistical or whatever to think that I could be right about issues and things like that. And then I also got accused of just like, oh, the liberal you know, woke culture has somehow ensnared you. That was the big thing that, a lot of them would say was that like the liberal woke, whatever, that I was like letting toxic empathy for, like, isn't that crazy that empathy could be toxic? I don't think that's true. I mean, I think
Yeah.
when we get those little alarm bells in our head, when we see someone not treated fairly or, equally, I think we need to listen to those. And I think the problem is that not that Christians don't have that, but that it's like one, they learn to turn it off because of constant compassion fatigue for one thing, like the constant everybody asking for prayer about things and all of that, and just kind of sharing each other's problems. I think we kind of get compassion fatigue as Christians.
Yeah.
And so we learn to kind of tone down that empathy in a way. And then I also think that we place God above, because we place God above human beings, that his ways, we say his ways are higher. So even if I feel empathy for another person, I have to follow, God first or whatever. So I think that they just learn to turn it off because they have to, because of that mindset. And then so that's why they come to see it as like toxic or sorry, you can probably hear my kiddos yelling in the background. My
Oh, no
husband,
worries.
I
No worries.
probably shouldn't stay on too long so I can help him with bedtime. But yeah, I think the fact that people thought that I left because I had some liberal, like, woke culture get to me or whatever. And it's like the very opposite. It was like my empathy kind of led me to see these things on my own. I was when I started to deconstruct during like COVID, I was very, very hesitant and cautious to ever like engage in any or ever take in any information from either side. Like, either Christian scholars who I thought were kind of being dishonest with their apologetics and were driven by money. And then same thing on the other side, I was very afraid to take anybody's word for it because, I was afraid there was a liberal like agenda, right? So it wasn't that I like saw liberal culture first and I was like, that seems better and I'm empathetic and I, want that. It was more like the more that I deconstructed my faith and thought about how women are treated in the Bible and how all kinds of things, it led me more down that path. And then I was like, you know what, I'm more aligning with these people over here, kind of thing. So it wasn't like I left specifically because I was indoctrinated by a liberal agenda or something like that, or because I wanted to be a part of the liberal agenda. It was that once I deconstructed, I just started to align that way more. So I think that's something that everybody kind of tried to accuse me of, I guess. And it's so crazy to me too, because if they're saying, oh, it's because the liberal agenda got to you, it's like, well, then you're saying you very much so have planted yourself on the conservative side of things. And so you very much so have let politics into your religion. And as soon as you let politics into your religion, you muddy the waters. You're now following the politics viewpoint of your religion. So, I mean, I don't think people understand that the version of Christianity that they have is absolutely a version that has been influenced heavily by politics, that certain things have been made paramount issues and other things have been downplayed, and it all has to do with the politics, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't think they can see it, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the politics at this point, I would think is more obvious. I mean, I was just reading about I'm here in Georgia, as I've mentioned, and we've got Marjorie Taylor Greene of all people pointing
Oh
out
yeah.
that the politics, like she's talking about this, like of all the you know turn of events you would have expected, that wasn't on the.
I didn't have that on my bingo card, Tim.
I know, but like it's just you, and it's. I guess it's good that some people are seeing it, but yeah, that you'd wish that they could see the politics behind all this, both in terms of current day events, but also certainly the early formation of Christianity. That politics is just part and parcel of probably most every religion, but certainly of Christianity. I mean, heavily, obviously, with Constantine, but arguably even before then. And yeah, it hurts so much that people can't see the
The
ways.
whole
Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean
no,
to
please.
cut you off. I'm bad about that. The
No,
ADHD
I've been
urge to
doing
just jump in.
I've been doing so much
But
talking. You take over.
I was just going to say the whole Marjorie Taylor Greene situation. I really don't think that that is like she saw the light type of thing. I think it's she lost favor, fell out of favor, and was like, "Oh, I better pivot over to this side." You know what I mean? I think that was a big part of it because really, when you think about all the things that they can stomach and justify, it's insane. I think they've completely turned, like politicians, they've completely turned off their moral. Alarm bells. But and something for me too, I almost wonder, like, this is a crazy jump in topics. I'm sorry, but my brain just jumps that way. But when I think about the Apostle Paul, and he talks about how he more than anyone else, he had all the reason to stay in Judaism, and he was comfortable. He had the title, he had everything. And he's like, I count it all a loss kind of thing. I almost wonder if he fell out of favor and so kind of pivoted to the other side. I just wonder about that. And I also think that, like, another thing that I see now that I read the Gospels and stuff, in all of his letters, it's a call for monetary support. Yes, he's exhorting people to stay in the faith or like reminding them of their faith, but it's also kind of like he's keeping up with his money-making scheme there, right? Like he reaches out to these churches that he's visited for a little bit. He moves on to the next church. He keeps collecting money from the previous church and every once in a while sends them letters. And he would proselytize, on street corners, and he got thrown in jail for it, obviously, along with other, there were lots of street prophets like that. And so he was very good. I think the one thing Paul had going for him was he's just very good at convincing people in his writing and with his words, just very charismatic. Because I think his stuff, his writing came before the Gospels, right? So they think
Yeah.
those were probably the most original or date the closest back to the resurrection, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, probably he was coming at it from a perspective when Paul was, doing all this stuff, that it really was much more Gnostic and esoteric at that point. I think it evolved from Paul forward to be more slowly more literal. But yeah, there's so many things that Paul didn't put in there that would have helped paint the picture of like this was a literal man in a literal place in a literal time, and so many things he left out. It's just like that doesn't make sense.
I really think he was a grifter, though, too. I think he saw that people were moving toward it and that they were gullible and they were eating it up, and he took advantage of that by traveling around and he probably fell out of favor with the people he was with and just traveled around and made money, selling it to people, essentially, and then just could move on to the next town, which is what a lot
Yeah.
of the like faith healers and street prophets and things like that would do. And they still do in that like area of the world a lot of times to this day. There's still kind of like stuff like that going on. So Um,
Yeah.
it's just interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
if Paul was even real in this sense, I don't
I
think
know
there's really
that's true. We don't even know. We don't
yeah,
even
like,
know
there's
that.
no one talks about Jesus, no one talks about Paul
I know because
until, like,
how many of his letters are actually not even attributed to him now? Like so many have been apparently debunked as not even who the
yeah.
original that they think the original Paul, if there was one, was.
I
Um,
think there's so much that we just don't know about that time. I think if we ever, like, stood back, like, if we had some way to travel back in time and get all the old documents that we wish we had that are lost to time, and hopefully some of them are still buried somewhere. Maybe there's another Dead Sea Scrolls that's to be found, which would be really cool. But assuming that there's not much more to be found, that would just rock our world. I think that if we could theoretically go back in time and get those documents and or just see it physically, I
yeah.
think we'd be like,
We wouldn't
wait a
even know what it was. Like
yeah, like
it
we'd be like,
probably
wait a
looked so
second,
different.
this isn't explaining Christianity's origins. Like this is like totally turning history on its head. Like there was something
Yeah.
completely different that we didn't even think of going on there.
I
And it's
I
just like,
really
what is
think
this?
that Greek scholars just got a hold of it. Like I think what happened was rich people commissioned Greek scholars to write the Gospels. And then, like, the earliest Gospel, like you said, there were a ton that just don't even get mentioned because they were so out there, right? But there were some very good, very convincing writers, and they built off of each other. Like, obviously, Matthew and Luke build off of Mark or Q, a shared source, right? Like, I think it's obvious that they were engaging in mimesis, like Dennis R. MacDonald says, where they were taking the, I'm sorry, and stop me if I'm going down too many rabbit trails, but I think they were taking earlier gospels and trying to perfect them through mimesis. And the concept of mimesis is like it goes back to Plato and all of that. It's like they would take Plato's writings and people, that's why we don't even know if Plato's writings are actually his, because people would take his writings and try to perfect different philosophical things or fill plot holes. And that's why I said, I think by the time you get to Matthew and Luke, and there are certain elements, or especially John, certain elements added to the story that they're very like apologetic in nature, meaning like the guards at the tomb, they weren't in the first iteration. They weren't in Mark. So they weren't in that first gospel. And I'm sure, like, if you're trying to fill plot holes, if you are engaging in that kind of mimesis, that's something you would think about as you're reading the gospel yourself. Well, what if, couldn't his disciples have just stolen his body and said he had risen again? And so then that writer placed guards at the tomb so that that was no longer a plausible thing to think when you read the gospel, their gospel. And then like the Doubting Thomas story, I really think that was added because there were questions about, well, there's this dude who was supposedly around Jesus who's called the twin, and we don't know if he was Jesus' twin or whoever, but he might have looked just like Jesus. How do we know he didn't take his place? Like, well, maybe in John, the latest gospel, they were trying to cover up, like the Greek scholar who wrote it was trying to cover up that plot hole by adding the story of Doubting Thomas, because Thomas is only mentioned one time prior, and it's to say, let us go die with him, that we may go and die with him. That's Thomas's only other line, but then he shows up in the very last gospel as the one who doubts that Jesus has really risen, and he's the one who goes and touches Jesus' wound. It's like putting Batman and Clark Kent in the same room together to prove that Clark Kent isn't Batman. You know, that's the kind of literary device they're using. And I'm sorry, I'm going way down a rabbit trail with that, but that's
No,
just
you're good.
stuff that I wish like I would have thought of is the fact that these writers were trying to perfect the earlier writers, and I wish that Christians could look at the text honestly and see that that's happening. Like I had told you that story the other day about how, is it Matthew or Luke? One of them. Yeah, I think it was Luke. Tries to fix the Mark and potentially Matthew's story about Jesus riding in on Palm Sunday, riding in on a donkey, because it was based on a prophecy in Zechariah 9:9, where it says that the king would come riding in on a donkey, and then repeats itself. It says a colt, the foal of a donkey. And so it seems very much like Matthew or Luke, whichever one it was trying to fix Mark's story by adding a second donkey, because he thought that's what Zechariah 9:9 actually said. So there's just so much evidence in the text that like the later gospels had access to the prior gospels and the writers, and were trying to fix a lot of things. I just think that's so fascinating, and I wish that Christians would look honestly at the text and see that. But when you come with the presupposition that it is all God-breathed and that these are actual literal accounts by eyewitnesses, or written down, dictated by eyewitnesses, or however you want to make the apologetic argument, I think you lose a lot of that, like that they were all trying to make different points, philosophical points, and all trying to fix different plot holes.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And I don't think they can see it. I don't think they can see it. You're right. Then they find endless ways, and I did it too, but we find endless ways to try to make it harmonize.
Yeah.
And we're not just being foolish in the sense of trying to harmonize things that we see today, but just we're really gutting original Christianity, which probably would have been horrified to think of trying to harmonize these things, because it's like each group is writing a gospel to make a point, and so to harmonize them would have been to literally misunderstand what they were doing. So they didn't want you to see each book as just fixing the other book, and to eventually get to like a perfect book that kind of just fixes all the plot holes. Like, they did things differently for a reason. And I think it is crazy that Christians just don't have what I like to call a scope for the imagination. Did you ever watch Anne of Green Gables at all as a kid?
I watched the newer series, a couple episodes, but I can't stand dramas because they're so drawn out. I don't really watch TV at all anymore. I can't sit through them. I'm like too ADHD to sit through it. The like short form media now, the like 30-second video clips is much more satisfying to the ADHD brain. So I don't watch a lot of like TV anymore. But sorry, what was the point you were making about
I'm not sure if the new versions have this quote in it or not. If it's in the book, of course, but the idea of a scope for the imagination, the Anne character talks about it all the time. Like, you have to have a scope for the imagination.
Yeah.
And I love that phrase because I think it applies so much to deconstruction.
Well,
Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, please. No, I was going to say, I think it just takes that exact dynamic to say, I could imagine one side, meaning the claims of Christian, I can imagine that this is a really divine book, and that truly this is different authors who are eyewitnesses of the actual true God-man, Jesus Christ, and he actually came and lived and did miracles and died and rose again. I could imagine that that's one possibility for how to interpret this, but I could also imagine about 10 other possibilities.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no, this is this first one that I imagine that our pastor gave to us. That's the only one that's worth considering. And it's like, and it's not just that it's the only one worth considering, it's that if you even entertain the others in any true sense, you're some horrible person. You're blasphemous.
Well, and it's crazy too, because the evidence does not point that these were Aramaic people. I mean, you could argue that God gave them the ability to speak perfect Greek, but I mean, think about it. We take 4 years of Spanish. I mean, I can hardly say like me llamo Michelle, like 10 years later or whatever. I can barely do that. Imagine seeing these things like 30, 40, 50 years. Well, no, okay. It was 50 to 100 years later. First gospel was written at 50 years later. Last gospel was written around 100 years or later, right? Well, at least as far as scholars, most scholars, what they would agree on, right? So like, imagine seeing those things that far before, and then knowing based on just the way that they spoke, the characters that they used, everything, scholars can tell when in the type of media it was written with and everything, scholars can tell when it was written. And just by context of what's going on in the passage and what they name things and all that, right? They could tell when these things were written. So imagine speaking Aramaic, writing these things 50 to 100 years later based on memory, or would it make more sense that because of the very sophisticated Greek in most of them, I think John wasn't very sophisticated Greek, if I'm remembering right, but most of it was very, very, very sophisticated Greek. So it wouldn't be something like, if you looked at a kid who, like one of my Chinese students who'd been learning English since they were in kindergarten and they were in high school, but it was their second language. Still, you could tell that was a Chinese, a Chinese high school student was writing that. It wasn't a native English speaker. So it's crazy to me that they can listen to the pastor saying that and just take his word for it, that these were written by the apostles, who saw them, or it was dictated, by the apostles or whatever. And we can't be honest with ourselves and say, no, these were written by very well-educated Greek native speakers, because you can definitely see a difference in the text. Just imagine it. And then also the type of language in a lot of the books, scholars know what language looked like at certain periods of history based on other texts. They can compare that to other texts. So like if you were to go back in time just 250 years ago, we would be potentially using these nows or whatever, or saying like we the people in order to establish a more perfect union. We don't say things like that anymore. We would say in order to make things better, like we don't use the same kind of language. It's just dishonest to tell people that, to give people any type of hope or let them think that this could have been written by like Aramaic apostles, fishermen, that sort of thing, tax collector, doctor, whatever you want to say it was. But it's just, I think it's really dishonest. So it's not just about having imagination, I think, to imagine all the different ways. It's like, yeah, we know it had to have been Greek scholars. Like it could not have been an Aramaic person. Like, and then too, on top of it, if this had been an Aramaic Hebrew person writing, or people writing these things, right? They wouldn't include things like imbibing the blood of, or symbolically imbibing the blood of Jesus. Like I've said that before, like that was 100% a Hellenized ritual there. In the Jewish culture, anything to do with imbibing blood, that would not have been in that religion, because it was expressly told by God to stay away from blood, to not consume blood. So that was definitely Hellenized. I don't think people realized how Hellenized the Jewish culture was by that time either. People were literally having surgeries to undo circumcision so that they would look more Greek, because all of the gymnasiums, all of the bathhouses, all of that, they were naked. And so they wanted to look more like the Greeks. And you've got the Maccabees who literally fought to keep Hebrew culture intact during that Hellenization by the Greeks. So that is how influenced by the Greeks the Jewish people were getting by the time Jesus came around. They were already extremely Greek. Just think about Native Americans living in the US for 200 years. They might have some of the same practices, but they've definitely been influenced by European culture that was brought over here, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good parallel. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And so many of these issues, they keep on making the likelihood of this being a divine book so small. And it's so frustrating when you try to explain this stuff, or even just bring up an overview of it, to Christians, and they just put their fingers in their ears, or they come up with these pat answers, and they really can't engage in it. Either they can or they won't, or both. It's
Yeah.
hard to
And
tell sometimes.
it's not even like it's one or two things. I mean, you could pick any single book, any single chapter, and there are issues. Like you can go back to like the Babylonian exile. You can go back to all of that. You can talk about how there are still passages that very much sound like the divine counsel, that Yahweh and all that is still part of the divine counsel in the Old Testament. You can find passages that were written probably before cosmic dualism was a part of the thing, before the devil was really the shaitan, was really part of the narrative, when it was mostly just God doling out both good and bad, or prior to the creation of the prior to the addition, I should say, of a heaven and a hell, which isn't even, that concept isn't even really found 100%, like, or at least the arguments that I've heard for it, it's like Gehenna was a literal place where they went and burned their trash. And so either they were saying Gehenna symbolistically, or it's more likely that they were actually referring to a real place that you would be burned up in a trash heap. Yes, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, whatever they believe, I think you're right to say there's clear discrepancies. It's unclear who wrote these things and whether they were trying to put them all together or not. Either way, at this point, they don't fit together. The stories don't claim, come together coherently. And so the Christian claim that they do come together coherently is it's so far-fetched, and it's so obvious, and there's so much more to the picture. At this point, it's obvious that if you're going to try to claim coherence and unity, and that you can, put these things together and harmonize them, that you really should be trying to harmonize, in my opinion, more, such as the Gospel of Thomas and other things. You should be putting more of those in there to harmonize them. The four that we landed on, there's no reason at this point, with all the academics we have, to stop with those four gospels. There's just no way. And there's also, you'd have to argue, well, which version of it, there's is there like 9 different endings to the Gospel of Mark or something? Like, which version are we harmonizing?
Yeah.
There's just so many issues. And I think, to me, despite all the individual things we can go into and say, well, let's zoom in on this particular issue, and then let's zoom out, let's zoom in on that issue. Regardless of all the individual issues, I think that, to me, the issues are, number one, like I think you said before, that there's just so many of them. It's not like a couple. It's like it's endless. But also, just the reality of the philosophy behind it. You're still, at the end of the day, even if you could find some way to harmonize it, you're still talking about, at the end of the day, the Christian worldview, which is a psychopathic God who's willing to torture his own children in the context where he does bizarre stuff with his own people, the children of Israel, for so long. Bizarre stories showing he's a mob boss, showing he's like the worst father ever, and then he
really is. But if you go to say that to a Christian, they automatically, as soon as you say psychopathic, they like aren't even hearing you anymore, right? They're not. But it's 100% true. Like, I was talking with Noelle the other day, and she was saying, like, think about the bloated bodies that would be lying around after the Great Flood, and like we paint pictures of the of Noah's flood all over. Just think about the actual picture that would have been after the water had receded, right? That would have been really terrible. It's just trying to justify an omni God. So all powerful, all knowing, and all good, right? Or I forget what the third one is. Now I can't remember. All powerful, all knowing, and everywhere all at once, right?
Omnipresent.
Omnipresent, omnipotent, and forget. Omni. Anyway.
Omniscient, omnipresent,
omnipotent, or omnipotent. Yeah. But rectifying that with suffering, it's impossible, because if you've got a God that can know all, see all, and do all, and you have any type of suffering, especially if you think about some of the most egregious suffering, like children being essayed or something along those lines, How could you rectify that? Could you imagine God standing in that room, which essentially that's what you're saying with an omni God? Could you imagine God standing in that room watching it happen and not step in? No. If a God did that, you would say automatically, that is a very evil God. Why? If he had all the power in the world, was standing right there, could see it, had knowledge of everything that was going on, why would he let that happen? It's just, it's so
Yeah.
evil to say that, that would be possible, but we don't ever think of that because we're so wrapped up in our community and the culture, and maybe we've got work and school on top of it, and we just don't stop to think about things. We think, this is even if there are issues with the Bible, but it's the culturally, this is what you do, or you can justify it a thousand ways, even if you see the issues. It's sad, but true.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too to me is, and this is going back to sort of my passion for the channel, is that so much of this to me is probably less about whether Christians actually believe this stuff, because I do question that. I do see some evidence that Christians don't necessarily believe it, even if they're willing to die on that hill, that they're actually living in a way that betrays it. They don't actually believe it on the worldview level.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it is, number one, the community pressure and the groupthink and the terror of what if I'm wrong. But also, I think a lot of it is going back to childhood trauma. And this is just
Yeah.
my 2 cents on it. I don't
Yeah.
want to get us too far off track, but like if you imagine that your Christian parents are trying to mimic Yahweh in the sense of the severity and it's my way or the highway, you do my, you obey me. And if not, I will literally beat your butt till it's red and all this. And when you think about how Christianity for so long, for so many of us, it taught parents to be awful to their kids. That basically what you were dealing with in this childhood trauma is you've spent your life as a child seeing this authoritarian figure who is toxic, who is difficult, who was
Yeah.
just causing you so much pain. And your main job at that point as a child in your feeble attempts to learn how life works, you're trying basically to get this authoritarian, toxic abuser to love you.
Right. And that does
And like,
carry on into adulthood. I think it does.
yeah,
Like we
but I mean, when
still
you
have that,
when you
like,
have that
want
as
to
a
please.
but I mean, when you have that as a kid with your human parents, it's not that far stretched to think, well, this is the same parallels I have with my heavenly parent. And that's why I think a lot of people can't see the psychopathic nature, because they'd have a tough time calling their parents a psychopath or an
That's
abuser.
true. It's
And
like
so,
the,
like,
what do you call it? The Stockholm syndrome, where when you're in it, when you're captive by it, you don't notice, or it's even like, kind of like how women, when they're in abusive relationships with men, they will downplay all of the horrible things and they will talk up all of the great things and they will convince themselves it's like because they need that person to love them, right? They want to be loved. They need to feel loved. And I think we do the same thing. And yeah, like you said, going back to children with their parents, yeah, we need to be loved. And so I think we play down all of the things that are red flags telling us, this is wrong. They shouldn't be doing this to me. And we play up all of the, if we're trying to be a good kid, if you're being the rebellious kid, but then we get that beat out of us, we learn to be the rebellious kid is the hard road to go down. Like that's the road that's going to lead to more pain, more suffering, more separation between us and our parents or whatever. So we just have to accept it. And so we have to find ways to psychologically justify what they're doing.
yeah, exactly. And I think for a lot of people, they're not as much concerned about the deconstruction process, because to them they don't see God as that big a deal. They see him as acceptable within a range of acceptable behavior. And it's just when you're trained to accept unacceptable behavior, you just don't
Yeah.
see it. Your God
Setting
really can
unhealthy
do no wrong.
boundaries.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Well, I mean, I know that abusive relationships can happen with anybody, but I think especially due to the Christian worldview and being taught all of that you're not good enough and that you have to constantly rely upon, rely upon, sorry, got little one in here trying to, hang on. Okay. Happy Easter. Sorry. Okay. She had to have one more hug goodnight and say Happy Easter again. It's probably third or fourth, Anyway, sorry. What was I even saying? I'm sorry.
I forget the exact point you were making at the last minute, but we were talking generically about Christians and how they're willing to the abuse of their parents and so forth, and normalizing it, and the Stockholm syndrome.
I just think it seems like, or at least from my perspective, like I've seen more like Christian girls fall more for the abusive types. Just a lot of friends in my life and things like that fall for abusive jerks, and I think it's because we've been taught our whole lives to undermine ourselves. That we don't know what's best for us. God knows what's best for us. We also, like you said, we're taught repeatedly to accept unhealthy boundaries, unhealthy things being done to us, abuse and all of that is justified due to something we did, right? In our minds. So I think it isn't the sole, reason, or I'm not going to say only Christian women get abused or women in religion get abused. But I think it really does set up that mindset and kind of reinforces that, you're not worthy, you're not good enough. And then you get in a relationship and you think, well, oh, he did this to me because I wasn't good enough, or I did this, or I did that. I think, because I kind of hear that echoed with a few women that I know. And I'm like, man, that sounds an awful lot like, well, yeah, maybe God was just trying to teach me through this moment. Same thing. Maybe my abusive spouse was just trying to teach me through this, because I did this or that, I don't know.
Yeah, well, or at least that God is trying to use your abusive spouse to teach you how to be patient and to endure hardship like a good soldier of Christ.
Yeah, that's such a terrible thing. And I think like that's the reason why like my mother-in-law, she stayed in a very abusive relationship for a long time too, just because she also when you have the belief, which like a lot in the fundamentalist, they believe once you get divorced, you're not like actually divorced. Unless your spouse passes away, you are still technically married to them in the eyes of God, right? And so they believe that if they were to get married again, that it would be adultery. So even if their spouse is abusive, they stay because they don't want to be alone for the rest of their lives, because they think I am not allowed, or I'm not worthy enough, I'm not good enough, whatever. But I'm not allowed to remarry again. This is it. I've got to make this one work, kind of thing too. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
true.
I wonder if that plays into it.
It is. I think it's very true. Very, very well said. Yeah, it absolutely does. And I knew so many people back when I was a Christian that was exactly their perspective. If you can't leave, it dishonors God so much. And it's interesting. When I was a Christian, I remember thinking that if God hates divorce so much, and He clearly does, because it's preached to us, 1,000 times, then why does God say to Israel, "I gave you a certificate of divorce"? like, like
Right.
the God who is saying,
That
"I hate
that's
divorce,"
very
is a
funny.
divorced God.
Yeah.
Our God is divorced. And it just was like, oh my goodness, like how backwards is this? We're saying it's awful, and yet he
Mhm.
did it. He did it, and he's our hero. He's the one we mimic. Oh, anyway, well, I think we're in danger of being off track a little bit, but I think
Oh, yeah, I know. We are definitely. I'm sorry about that.
no, you're good. I was just gonna say regarding your kids making noise, don't ever feel bad about it. Years ago, I went to a Mennonite church. And I'll never forget. I actually ended up doing an internship there for a short time, but I went to a Mennonite church. I'd been involved with the Mennonites many years as a Bible quizzer, and most of the people that we were competing against were Mennonite churches and schools. But I went to the church of one of the Mennonite sort of leaders of the Bible quizzing. Great guy, and he his church though it was such a weird experience compared to mine. Mine would, like, if your baby cries, you take the baby out like to the nursery. They went out of their way to make it clear that they did not want anyone to leave the main sanctuary. If your baby
Mm.
cries, everyone's used to it. Everyone else has a baby crying. And so you would hear babies crying, you'd see babies nursing, you'd see babies jumping up and down, you'd see babies jumping up and down on the pew, and just like that was normal. They were like, don't leave, because if you leave, you're not getting the word of God. If you need your kids here, then you need your kids here. So stay here. And it was so weird because it was so freaking loud at first. I was like, wow, there's so many kids talking, but you
You
get
know what
used to
though?
it.
I kind
You
of
drown
love
it out.
that. I kind
Yeah,
of love that though, because it
I did
does
too.
normalize, you know, it normalizes the fact that children are part of our world. I feel like we try
Yeah.
to, you know, we still are in that mindset, that like European or whatever mindset, like children need to be seen and not heard. Like just in the public sphere, it's like children don't exist. Things were not built with them in mind, like having to lift kids up to a bathroom sink and things like that. Like children are part of our world. They're part of our daily lives. And it's just we have not built our lives around children, the elderly, the disabled. We really just anybody who's marginalized at all. We don't build our lives around that. So I think that's actually a little bit kind of cool, but also the reason they were doing it, maybe not. So
Yeah, it was a
um,
cool experience for me to see it. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't want anyone to not call in just because their kids are in the background. But
I think
well,
it's really cool that you have had so many experiences, went out of your way to really learn a lot about different things while you were still in the faith. So like the Mennonite thing, and you said you did like the lactation thing. You just learned. It seemed like you were kind of going out of your way more so than a lot of people in that sort of faith circle would, to learn
yeah,
more
it was
outside your
very
bubble.
my journey was very eclectic. It's interesting. Some of it was pushed upon
Eclectic,
me,
yeah.
like when I went to the pastoral program at Lancaster Bible College. Like the pastor or the head of the department literally said, I'm telling you, I want you to go to 12 completely different churches. Like you're going to basically not see your own home church for the next 12 weeks. For the next 12 weeks, you go to different churches. You know, you go to a black church, you go to a Hispanic church, whatever. You go to a Quaker church. I don't care if you think they're
That's really
heretical,
cool
just go
though.
to a different church. But so that was like forced on me. But other stuff was my chosen path. And yeah, it's been quite a journey. I've had many people tell me I need to write a book about it, and I think I should at some point. It would take a
You
while to write it all,
should.
but I need to write it down if for no other reason, just to make sure I remember it all. But well,
I honestly think experiences like that were also really pivotal in my deconstruction, like going to China and just seeing that
yeah,
there's like millions of people on the other side of the world that just this is not a major thing for. Like, would we really think they were all going to hell? That's something else I wish, to get back on topic. Sorry. That's something else that I wish that Christians would realize, is that there's millions of other people out there on the other side of the planet who don't believe in this stuff. Like they have nothing to do with it. Their culture revolves around a whole different set of beliefs, and to say that they're all going to burn and they're all wrong. And if you were to go to that culture, they're the most like hospitable people, wonderful people. And so that's something else I wish Christians would get out of their bubble as much as possible and see, um, you know, not just look down on other cultures or beliefs, and actually look at them as really beautiful different cultures.
yeah, and arguably some aspects of some cultures are far superior than our Christian culture.
Yeah.
I mean, not all of them, but arguably some of them are. It's amazing, and I
You know
think
what
too
was
the idea that Christians like that every time that Christianity comes into a culture, it makes it better. There's some things
right.
that just
Sorry.
that's flat out wrong, but other things, it isn't Christianity, it's just that general culture, compared to tribal culture. Like, for example, that was my journey, like, where they would constantly say, because I was going into tribal missions, they'd say, "Look, whenever Christianity comes to the tribes, their life improves, like,
Yeah.
dramatically improves. Their health
Mm.
improves, of course, because of the medical care that people bring, but also like women, especially women, are treated like dogs in these tribal groups. Women are animals. Women are property. I remember when I was in New Guinea, and I went to this little tiny island off the side for a week, just the middle of nowhere. Like you just, it's crazy to even get there. But I remember it's literally like with being with this guy who was a tribal elder, And he'd been through this whole journey, and he was so excited to tell us what happened. And he's like, my wife used to be my property. He said, I've literally, in my pre-Christian days, I've taken a stick from the fire and I used to poke it in her side and like burn her belly. It's like, she was just a dog to me. It's like, now I love my wife and I love my kids and I take my responsibilities as a father seriously. Like, that's beautiful. That is awesome, but that's not Christianity. You could have sent some Chinese people in there who were Buddhists, and the outcome probably would have been the same,
Yeah,
that you need to
anybody.
love your family.
So,
Yeah, just there's so many
well,
crazy things that we just the connections just aren't legitimate.
and these tribal people too, some of the tribes, they're not necessarily they're pre-industrial, you know, they're pre it doesn't mean that they're not great. I mean, I think honestly the fact that some of those cultures have stayed the same for thousands of years shows that some of it's working with some things. There are some cultures where, you know, they don't like store up wealth for themselves. They, you know, just live off the land as they need, and they've, you know, it's like they're living more like our ancestors did and stuff. And that's not a wrong way of life. It's not a backwards way of life. It's just a different way that you know, we've developed due to, you know, our culture and everything. It doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but to always view our culture as superior to is just crazy. Some
Yeah.
conversations that something else, like, I guess, that I do wish Christians would know too, is like these other cultures, these other religions that you put down, if you would really learn more about them from those people's perspective, you could see how they sort of view things in a different philosophical mindset, different viewpoints on things. So like we look at the Muslim culture, right? I'm not endorsing Islam or anything like that at all. But we look at that culture and we think, oh wow, they really oppress women because they have to cover their heads and things like that. And just some of the things that the Muslim women had said, you know, I was like, but how do you, like, why do you, you know, because they were very open about allowing me to ask questions and stuff. You know, because I work with the refugees and all that, and I also took Arabic, and I had an Arabic professor who was really just
Wow.
really cool lady about letting me ask her lots of questions about. She lives in Saudi Arabia, actually. She's from the U.S., but she lives in Saudi Arabia. She's a professor over there, and so I asked her some questions. I was like, you know, I don't see how, you know, like, 'cause she's very kind of feminist, you know? It's like, how do you wear an abaya and a hijab and you're like feminist? And she's like, well, I don't look at it as I'm doing this so that men don't look at me. That's not why I do it. She's like, I do it because I don't want to have to compete with my body and my hair. I don't want that to be what people look at and see. I want them to see me for my brain. And so this is like my shroud so that I can just go and exist as myself and not like be part of the pop culture and always have to have a different fashion and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting way to think about it. That's okay. That's, you know, like a healthier way that I never knew that existed within this culture, because I had been, you know, taught Islamophobia from such a young age, being Christian, being in the U.S. and stuff like that. So I just thought that was interesting that, you know, cultures will look at them as a monolith and say it's all bad, but in reality, they're extremists in every religion. They're extremists in any culture, and there are, you know, moderates and you know, more reasonable people who see balance in things too. So in every aspect, like you said, even in the atheist culture, there's like extremist kind of atheists, and then there's more balanced. But yeah, I don't know. I think if Christians would go out of their way to learn more in depth and not just like surface, if they would actually talk to people and have those kind of eclectic experiences, like you said you had, I think they would learn, you know, that it's not like the world is something to be afraid of, and that we have to turn to God because this world is just lost, and everybody who doesn't have Christianity is just so depraved. of, the truth and goodness and all that. It's just not true.
Yeah, they really poison that well pretty intensely. It's a good point, and I think it's lovely to think about how deconversion helps us. I think other people have said this in different ways, so I'll keep it short, but just to say that it helps us to stop judging everybody else and stop walking into a room and saying, I need to figure out, who's saved and who's not and so forth. It's an amazing journey to think like, wow, like I've got a lot more to learn from other people. Like I literally need to walk into a room and say, I'm just here to be your friend, but also just like I hope that I can share something and someone can learn from me, that I equally have stuff to learn from them. I'm not everybody's else's teacher just because I'm a Christian, I'm
Right.
not, especially as a supposed authority figure or, white male in the church. Like I'm not an authority figure. I'm
I have to
just
be an
another human
example.
being. We're all like all of us, everyone, every religion, everywhere of all time, we're all just escorting each other to our end of life. We're all just quietly walking into the dark. And it's like none of us have any extra light. None of us have any extra insights. We're at the end of the day, we're all just walking into the darkness and as blind people. And we're already blind. We're walking into the dark. We're walking towards the end of our lives. And to have the arrogance that we do, that we're somehow special and everyone else needs to just
Chosen. We're the
sit
chosen
down. Yeah,
ones.
chosen ones, and everyone else needs to listen up. Yeah, that's one of the hardest things about that to me, that to believe that
Calvinism.
Judaism and Calvinism still believe that stuff. It's just how an entire nation of people with Judaism in many ways, and how an entire segment of Christianity with Calvinism can say that is just, it's so inhumane. We're extra special, and you need to listen to us because we have the extra special revealed truth and interpretation. It's sick beyond words, but just like we're all just humans. We're all just trying, and
Desireless.
we're all just primates. We're all just extra conscious primates who are thinking to ourselves, really like to understand what this life's about. And we're asking harder questions than the other primates, but that doesn't make us special. It just makes us the next evolution. And the next evolution after us is going to have better questions and better ways to find out how to answer those questions. And, they may be leaps ahead of us, and the next iteration will be leaps above that. We're all just, we're blind people leading the blind. And if we would have a little more humility, I think we'd definitely have a lot better experience with other cultures, because we'd be like, I'm just here to learn. I'm just here to listen and just here to be your friend. But Christianity deprives you of that beautiful experience. Anyway, I should probably wrap up soon here, but Stella, it's
Yeah,
so
I
good
know.
to have
I'm
you on.
sorry.
No, you're good. I
I've
appreciate you coming on.
monopolized.
No, you're good. Well, we always appreciate you coming on. So definitely keep an eye out for any other topics that look of interest to you. But I need to go check on my kids too. What I do when it's bedtime, and they're here with me, I put them in bed. I get them in bed, and they're all done. But I find that whenever I'm like done whatever else I'm doing, and I go check on them, somebody somewhere has automatically kicked their sheets off or something, and it's always something. But it's a privilege to be able to check on them and make sure that they're warm enough and so forth. But I find this is like around the hour when I need to make sure that I check on that, because they toss and turn. I'm not sure if I did it as a kid much, but they toss and turn, and all of a sudden they're all over the place. But it's funny. But anyway, I should probably go check with them soon. But and also just to wrap up here with the top of the hour. But it's so good to chat with you, and thank you so much for sharing your insights as always and your stories. It's good to hear from you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy Easter. He is not risen.
he is not risen indeed.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Shell. All right, thank you so much, Shell. Appreciate that. And there's a few comments here I'm going to skip for the sake of us being at the top of the hour here, but I'll just read this one here. I see at the end. Lila Feldman says, I met professors like this in college, Muslim women who were educated. Yeah. I'm sure there's so much we could learn from hearing from their perspective on everything, including their perspective on the way they do life as to why they do it. And it's a good reminder just that until we've been in certain people's shoes and until we've seen the world through their eyes, that probably we're misunderstanding something, if not a lot of things. So good reminders, very good reminders. Well, thank you again, everyone who jumped in. I know we had Keith was in the back there for a while, and Keith dropped. Keith, if you're still in the live stream, we'll definitely have you on tomorrow, and or whenever you're jumping next. And if you do want to cover it. We'll be on a different topic, but if you want to cover this topic, we can do both. You can cover tomorrow night's topic and the topic for tonight. But anyway, thank you all so much again for being a part of my life. Thanks for your support. I did want to mention as well, did have a new member, Donna Jackson. Thank you so much. If anyone wants to become a YouTube member, you can do that obviously through YouTube. There's other ways to support this channel through all the ways that are listed beneath this video. And if anybody wants to do an interview, please reach out to me on Facebook at Harmonic Tim or by email, HarmonicAtheist@yahoo.com. And if anyone's interested in the peer-to-peer support, which I've just launched and I'm just getting started with, there's information beneath this video about that as well. So I'd love to do that with you if it's of interest to you. That's not clinical. It's not therapy. It's peer-to-peer support. But if anyone's interested in that, we can certainly get connected and get set up. Thank you all so much. I love you. I'll talk to you all soon. And by the way, I'm almost done that sonnet. I've been working on it. Sonnet, my sonnet is coming out. I'm excited about it. I think you'll appreciate it. There's some stuff in there that I think, again, it's so much of our deconstruction is about not just what we learn. It's about finding the language to describe what we went through. That's why I'm drawn so much to poetry. But I think you'll appreciate some of the ways that we look at this stuff in our poetry. And I've got one coming out, a sonnet based on sort of loosely based on Shakespeare's Sonnet 29. But I think you'll appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with you shortly, but almost there, getting closer. But thank you all so much. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.